Hi, this is Craig Stocks, and this is my photo critique of the day. This is a wonderful photo of a pier at, I believe it's Sunset, that was provided to us by Scott Owens. So Scott, thank you so much for providing the image. Not sure, it looks like this is in the ocean, so I don't know if this is something in Florida or somewhere else, but it looks like a sunset image. Could be wrong on that. It's frequently hard to tell the difference. But wonderful scene with the lights along the pier reflecting in the water as the pier is reaching out into the water, and then we see the sun setting back here. And again, this looks like it was taken after the actual sunset during the civil twilight time, which is around 40 minutes after sunset, and actually when some of the best sunset photography takes place and when you frequently get the best colors in the sky. I talked the other day about how we're really drawn to this warm color, cool color combination, and again we have that here in spades. So we really have nice colors, nice color contrast, and then we have a subject of the pier. So it has a subject other than just the background, and that fits well with my philosophy that a sunset or a sunrise image should have a subject other than the sky, and that the sky should be the background for a subject, not the subject itself. A couple of things that you might consider toying with this image that you may or may not agree with. The first thing, well, there's really two things, I guess, that caught my attention immediately. The first is the horizon, and something I've talked about before, and the horizon line here is angled a little bit, so it's running downhill from right to left, and that would also have an effect on the verticals in the center of the frame. So I think I would start by adjusting the angle so that we get a true level horizon. It's not off by much, but just a little bit. The other thing that I think I would look at, just tilt this by hand a little bit. The other thing that caught my attention is there's one light over here on the far left side that is, to me, pulling attention away from the central focus. So again, I think in terms of just subtle cropping, I would maybe crop that out. If you need to leave that in for some reason, you could clone that out. But I feel like that gives it a more framed, more balanced, with less attention kind of pulling our eye over to the edge of the frame. The other thing I would comment on, that I wouldn't be afraid to boost the brightness and the color saturation on an image like this. Depending on how you shoot sunsets, sometimes they can come out pretty drab looking, even though they looked nice and intense and colorful in person. And the other thing that can happen with sunsets and sunrises is the difference in how we perceive different colors and their relative brightness. And just for comparison, if we put this on a white background, we can see that even the brightest, most colorful areas are still fairly dark, and somewhere in the a little bit above midtone, looking at the numbers up here, in the 60-65% range, so maybe a mid-tone to three-quarter tone. If we look at how colors are translated in terms of brightness, and just for comparison, let's look at this swatch of 6 colors, red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta. And each one of these swatches is that color, just pure color, and 100% saturation. So this was created in an sRGB document with 100% saturation of each one of these colors. And the interesting thing is, if I remove the crop on here, so we look at the brightness of the different colors, we can see that red actually translates to about a 54% luminosity. Yellow, at its most saturated, is 98% luminosity. So saturated yellow is actually very bright, where fully saturated blue is actually very dark. And what that means is, we look at sunset images, if we put more yellow into the image, that in itself will tend to brighten the image up. And if we brighten up the whites, that will start to increase the saturation in the yellows, and at least on my monitor it's also bringing out a little bit more of the fine detail and texture, some of these filamentary cloud shapes that are going on over here. And you could even bump up the saturation a little bit more, and what's happening is it's boosting the saturation in the yellows and reds much more than it is in the blues. So it gives a little bit different feeling to the image, I think. Right now we're looking on a white background. If we go to a medium gray to get it kind of back to normal, it really starts to make the yellow pop a little bit more and bring out more of the cloud structure in the yellows without the blues going overboard. If the colors do start to go overboard, let's say we really want to pump in a lot of saturation for some reason, and this is going probably beyond what you would want to. If the sky starts to get too saturated, which is not unusual when you are working with the saturation slider, you can come to the HSL sliders, which stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. Choose saturation, and it's easiest if you just choose the targeted adjustment tool. Then you can move over the blue and pull that saturation back down, and in effect desaturate the blue a little bit. And just by desaturating the blue, that also tends to exaggerate the saturation of the yellow. So just some things that you might consider playing around with sunset images in general. Reset this back to the way Scott had it, which is just a beautiful image. The other thing that you might have tried, and I don't know what the shoreline looked like here, sometimes it's interesting to shoot from the other side of the pier so that the direct part of the sunset would have been behind the pier, and that might have given you an interesting, different perspective on the pier at sunset as well. It certainly would have been, probably less panoramic and more silhouetted. Just a different option. Sometimes it's fun to try both if you have the time, and those are things that are more of a, things you might do in a perfect world, and unfortunately we don't live in perfect worlds. So that's it for today. If you'd like to have your image included, please send it to me on Facebook, and as always, everybody, have a great day.